Flavio Briatore has set the paddock on fire once again. This time, it's not Red Bull, not the FIA, it's Lewis Hamilton and Ferrari at the center of his storm. After the chaotic Singapore Grand Prix, Briatore dropped a revelation that changes everything about how we see Hamilton's first season in red. Because according to him, the problem isn't the driver. It's the car and the politics behind it. The first truth that emerged from Singapore was simple but brutal. Ferrari's failure wasn't random. It was the predictable result of an engineering compromise made months ago. When the SF-25 was conceived, Maranello's aerodynamicists were obsessed with clawing back the downforce gap to Red Bull. Every millimeter of the car's bodywork was sculpted to cut drag and stabilize airflow at high speed. But that pursuit of efficiency came at a cost. The brake cooling system, already marginal in last year's design, became critically undersized. In tracks like Monza or Baku, where airflow is constant, that flaw hides behind straight-line performance. In Singapore, however, it was mercilessly exposed. Telemetry data, later leaked from the team's internal review, showed that Hamilton's car began overheating within the first 3 laps. Temperatures in the brake ducts climbed beyond the safe threshold, forcing the engineers to activate an aggressive lift-and-coast strategy from the second stint onward. Essentially, Hamilton had to sacrifice acceleration and braking power to preserve the car from failure. Every time he approached a braking zone, the risk of total fade was real. Onboard sensors recorded brake disc temperatures exceeding 900 degrees Celsius, a figure that makes sustained attack impossible. It wasn't that Hamilton lacked pace, he was piloting a time bomb. The chain reaction this triggered inside the race team was chaotic. Ferrari's pit wall had to choose between 2 impossible options: protect the car and finish in one piece, or push and risk retirement. That decision wasn't purely strategic, it was emotional. You could hear it in Hamilton's tone over the radio, a mix of disbelief and anger. He had been told the car could fight McLaren and Mercedes. Instead, it was barely surviving. "I feel useless," he said, and that single phrase summed up the mood inside the garage. For a driver who built his legend on control, this was the ultimate humiliation, being trapped in a machine that refused to obey. Ferrari's internal post-race report confirmed what Briatore had insinuated publicly. The problem wasn't just technical, it was institutional. Engineers had flagged the cooling issue back in February, but higher management overruled the proposed redesign. Their argument was that altering the brake ducts would compromise airflow to the side pods, affecting aerodynamic efficiency and costing precious tenths on high-speed circuits. The result was a design philosophy built on denial, fast on paper, fragile in practice. The irony is that the SF-25's top speed advantage, around 4 km per hour over Mercedes, meant nothing when both drivers were forced to drive conservatively through every braking zone. What makes Briatore's statement even more explosive is that it wasn't conjecture. He had access to the same data Ferrari tried to keep internal. His sources within the paddock confirmed that the team knew the flaw could resurface in hot, low-speed environments. That knowledge transforms his defense of Hamilton from speculation into fact. "Lewis isn't finished," he said. "He's trapped in a car that isn't honest." For many fans, those words hit harder than any technical debrief, because they revealed a team that had prioritized appearances, a sleek aerodynamic concept, over giving one of the sport's greatest drivers a trustworthy weapon. Inside Maranello, the aftermath of Singapore was like a storm without thunder, silent on the surface, but destructive within. The engineers knew exactly what had gone wrong. The SF-25 had been born from a political equation, not a purely technical one. The aerodynamic department had the final word on design decisions, while the mechanical team was forced to adapt around those restrictions. This imbalance created a car that excelled in controlled wind tunnel conditions, but fell apart when exposed to the unpredictable temperatures and mechanical stress of a real race. Every mistake on track was simply the visible symptom of that internal hierarchy, where image and data models ruled over engineering instinct. When telemetry from Singapore was reviewed in Ferrari's control room, the numbers were damning. Brake cooling efficiency dropped by more than 20% compared to baseline simulations. Heat transfer between the calipers and suspension arms disrupted tire temperature balance, forcing both Hamilton and Leclerc into an uncontrollable thermal cycle. For a driver like Hamilton, whose strength lies in precision and tire management, this was torture. Every braking zone became a gamble. Hit too hard, and the brakes would overheat. Lift too early, and the lap time was gone. He was trapped in a paradox. Protecting the car meant destroying his rhythm, and attacking meant risking total collapse. Within the team, frustration reached breaking point. Loic Serra, Ferrari's head of vehicle performance, reportedly clashed with senior aerodynamicists during the post-race debrief. His argument was simple. Ferrari's obsession with downforce had blinded them to the car's mechanical fragility. According to internal sources, Serra demanded an emergency review of the SF25's thermal architecture, a demand that was quietly dismissed. Why? Because a mid-season redesign would have required scrapping months of CFD simulations and wind tunnel work, effectively admitting failure to the board. In Formula One, perception is currency, and Ferrari wasn't ready to declare bankruptcy. Briatore's comments fit into this context like a piece of a puzzle that had been missing. When he said Lewis isn't driving the car he was promised, he was referring precisely to this conflict. Hamilton had joined Ferrari under the assumption that he would lead a technical revolution, a project built around him, not around politics. Instead, he found a structure still chained to internal rivalries and risk aversion. The car may look stunning in photographs, but beneath the carbon fiber lies a labyrinth of compromises. Ferrari built a car that could win headlines, not races. Briatore didn't expose that dynamic. He simply confirmed what everyone inside already knew, but dared not say aloud. For a driver of Hamilton's caliber, the experience is uniquely cruel. In his Mercedes years, he had direct influence over development direction. His feedback shaped upgrades and defined strategy. At Ferrari, that authority remains diffused, filtered through committees and corporate layers. Every suggestion becomes a discussion, every decision a negotiation. Briatore's statement, though controversial, gave voice to that frustration. It turned a technical issue into a cultural one, pointing out that Ferrari's true weakness isn't its machinery, but its management of truth. It's not that the engineers don't know what's wrong, it's that they're not allowed to fix it fast enough. The irony is that the data proves Hamilton's instincts were right all along. His complaints about instability under braking and inconsistent rear grip matched perfectly with the team's internal findings. Yet those warnings were initially dismissed as adaptation issues. Now, the evidence leaves no room for denial. The SF25's balance window is so narrow that even a 2-degree temperature change can alter the entire handling profile. In Singapore, that sensitivity became a liability, so severe that both cars were effectively driving 2 different races. Hamilton's feedback wasn't emotional, it was diagnostic. And when Briatore spoke, he turned that diagnosis into a headline the world could finally understand. In the end, the engineering problem was never purely mechanical. It was psychological. The pressure to deliver results has created an environment where short-term optics overpower long-term progress. Engineers know what needs to change, but fear the political consequences of admitting fault. Hamilton, a driver who thrives on transparency and structure, has collided head-on with an organization built on hierarchy and caution. Singapore was just the flashpoint, the visible crack in a system long under strain. And Briatore's revelation was the lightning bolt that illuminated it for everyone watching. The turning point didn't happen on the track. It happened behind closed doors in a meeting room inside Ferrari's hospitality suite just hours after the Singapore race. The atmosphere was suffocating. Fred Vasseur sat at the head of the table, surrounded by exhausted engineers, performance analysts, and senior aerodynamic staff. The telemetry reports were projected on the wall, lines of data, glowing red literally and figuratively. As each graph confirmed the same pattern of overheating and loss of brake efficiency, silence filled the room. No one wanted to speak first. It wasn't just about understanding what went wrong. It was about admitting that the disaster everyone feared had finally arrived. When the discussion began, it quickly turned into confrontation. Loic Serra demanded to know why his requests for a redesign of the brake ducts had been overruled. Others accused the aerodynamics department of prioritizing vanity metrics over reliability. The debate escalated to shouting, an unthinkable scene in the famously disciplined environment of Maranello. Vasseur, usually composed, lost patience. According to insiders who later described the meeting, he slammed his fist on the table and shouted, "We can't pretend this didn't happen." It was the moment Ferrari's internal tension became impossible to contain. What had begun as a technical failure had evolved into a cultural breakdown. Meanwhile, Hamilton's camp was asking its own questions. His performance engineers had already compiled comparative data between his car and Leclerc's, showing that both suffered identical thermal degradation, but Hamilton's setup, slightly more aggressive on brake migration, amplified the problem. That revelation deepened his frustration. The issue wasn't driving style, it was predictability. He could adapt to any car, but not to one that changed character corner by corner. Within hours, his representatives began demanding transparency from Ferrari, seeking clarity on whether the car he was driving matched the technical promises made when he signed. The silence from management only fueled the fire. By Monday morning, Italian media had caught wind of internal discord. Headlines spoke of civil war inside Maranello. Reports hinted at disagreements between Vasseur and senior Ferrari executives who wanted to downplay the scale of the failure. Yet Briatore, ever the political barometer, broke the silence before the team could control the narrative. In a single interview, he reframed the entire story. This is not about Hamilton losing speed, it's about Ferrari losing direction. With that, he transformed a technical embarrassment into a crisis of leadership. It was a masterstroke of timing, one that shifted public sympathy toward Hamilton and exposed Ferrari's vulnerability to the world. Inside the team, the impact was immediate. The management feared that Briatore's comments might push Hamilton further away, emotionally if not contractually. Yet, for the engineers, it felt like vindication. Someone had finally said what they couldn't. His words mirrored their frustration. The car's failures were not the result of incompetence, but of constraint. In that sense, Briatore became an unlikely ally of the technical staff, giving them the external pressure they needed to justify internal change. The problem was that Ferrari's upper management saw it differently, as betrayal. To them, Briatore had exposed private weaknesses that should have stayed hidden. From that moment, the atmosphere in Maranello changed. Meetings grew colder, communication tighter, and public statements more rehearsed. What once was a team searching for solutions became a team protecting its image. And in the middle of it all stood Hamilton, a symbol of excellence trapped in a system unable to accept accountability. Singapore had started as a race weekend. It ended as a breaking point. The internal meltdown wasn't just about performance, it was about identity. Ferrari, once known for passion and pride, now faced the most dangerous enemy of all denial. And Briatore, knowingly or not, had forced them to look in the mirror.